Merci encore à tout le monde d'être là aujourd'hui. Donc, déjà, au cours de
Thank
la
you
première
everyone
heure
for
qui a
coming here.
commencé hier, les intervenants ont retracé les
And
fondements
since yesterday we
de
started this
l'impérialisme
conference, we have talked about different
en
things
Afrique.
concerning
Ils ont
imperialism,
également
colonialism in
examiné la
Africa.
dynamique géopolitique actuelle en soulignant comment l'héritage de la colonisation continue de
And one of the things
fracturer
that we talked about
les
was
économies
how the heritage of colonialism
africaines
is
et la
driving the way we live
militarisation.
and the way we behave on our
Les
continent.
intervenants ont également mis en lumière le rôle persistant des puissances étrangères dans
The
l'alimentation
different speakers spoke about
des
how foreign
interventions
powers
militaires
still tend to
devant
control
l'État
certain things
et
on our
les alliances
continent, Africa.
privilégient les intérêts externes au bien-être des peuples africains. Il a également été relevé que les dirigeants africains partagent une responsabilité importante dans la perpétuation des
Once
systèmes
again, our
coloniaux
speakers talked
qui
about how
affaiblit
our
davantage
African leaders are
les
contributing to colonialism, even
capitaux
though the foreign powers are no more around,
étrangers
but our African leaders are
plutôt que la
perpetuating this
souveraineté
colonialism.
et les aspirations de leur
And
peuple.
due to this, sometimes
Aujourd'hui,
we
nous
question
allons
ourselves
également
about the
échanger sur le
sovereignty of our various
panafricanisme.
nations.
Et sur ce sujet, d'entrée, je vais donner la parole au professeur
And on
Gnaka,
this topic, we
qui
are
va
going to
exposer
listen to our
ce
first
qu'est
talk
le
for today.
panafricanisme et les expressions des sentiments anti-occidentaux en Afrique. Donc,
And
professeur,
its topic will
je
be
vous
on
donne la parole
Pan-Africanism and
pour que vous puissiez faire votre
our sentiments towards
présentation.
external powers. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, can you see me? Okay. Uh, so the greater, how are you? And can you hear me, everyone?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Okay. So okay, I'm a little bit surprised because usually, when you are the keynote, you speak. You're not the first one to speak, but Guy wants me to speak first, so I'm going to speak first. And it's today. I am supposed to go somewhere, but I gave my word to Guy, so I needed to respect that. So that's why I'm here. Uh, he asked me to speak about Pan-Africanism and then the expression of anti-Western sentiment. So I had a PowerPoint, but like I said, I'm not going to be able to show it. But I have prepared my presentation like I always do. And then I'm going to try and follow the outline so that it can be clear when we do this presentation. So the first thing that I want to do is to try and then give a definition of Pan-Africanism. I'm going to give a brief history of Pan-Africanism, and I'm going to talk about what I call the fundamentals of Pan-Africanism. And I will talk about a couple of things, and then I will be speaking about Pan-Africanism today. And then I'm going to show on one, two, three, four, like 4, 5 expressions of anti-Western sentiment. So as Greta said that I should go slowly. So, and then as I do not have a PowerPoint and I have a mask because I had an accident with my teeth when I was in Switzerland last week. So that's why I'm wearing it now. So, how do you define Pan-Africanism? Pan-African is a dimensional phenomenon, multi, and then it is about the solidarity of Africans. And the word was coined in 19 by Henry Sylvester Williams. The first Okay, so W.D. Boy organized the 5 Pan-African Congresses, 1900, 1919, and 1921, 1923, 1927, and 1945. The most famous one is the Manchester Congress that took place in 1945, And then the topic was on the decolonization of Africa because it was during the war, during World War II, or when World War II ended, and then the invasion of Ethiopia by Italy, which was defeated two times in 1887 and 1896 by when Ethiopia had defeated Italy, and Italy wanted to take its revenge. They invaded Ethiopia in 1935, and then in the context of the war, our ancestors decided to put emphasis on the decolonization of Africa. Kwame Nkrumah from Ghana, who was at the Manchester Congress, was going to lead Ghana to independence. And then when Ghana became independent, Kwame Nkrumah said that the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked up to the total liberation of the continent of Africa. It was a Pan-African doctrine. So Kwame Nkrumah was going to mobilize the state of Ghana in order to contribute to the decolonization of the continent. And thanks to him and his struggle, Ghana was going to be the safe haven for nationalists and Pan-Africanists. It was in the context of booming Pan-Africanism. Gamal Abdel Nasser in the northern part of Africa, and then Algeria had already started the war of independence on November the 1st, 1944. So that was the context. In South Africa, people were fighting for against colonialism. Now, one thing I want to say quickly, and as I'm giving the history of Pan-Africanism, is that before the 1958 conference, Pan-Africanism had a notion of black identity and black self-determination. But the conference of 1958 was going to bring some change in the understanding of the notion of African personality, which was coined by Edward Blyden in the 19th century. And then also the Pan-Africanism was going to be seen as a multiracial dimension, as a multiracial phenomenon. Black people, white people, Arabs, Indians, all united against colonialism, where all of them were claiming Pan-Africanism. So when people tell you that Pan-Africanism, it is exclusively for black people, historically, it is not true. In the beginning, yes, but since 1958, the notion had changed. Now, it was during the conference that Frantz Fanon from Martinique, who was working for the Algerian Revolution, was going to somehow change the trajectory of the methodology of struggle. And then people were talking about nonviolence. Thanks to Fanon, now people were going to accept the idea of using an armed struggle in order to fight for independence. So that was the golden age of Pan-Africanism. Then later on, leaders like Patrice Lumumba, who was at the conference 58, Félix Moumi, who was at the conference in 58, and many other leaders were going to be ostracized, eliminated politically or physically. Pan-Africanism was going to go into a hibernation, and thanks to Nelson Mandela's struggle, or thanks to the struggle against apartheid, thanks to Thomas Sankara, Maurice Bishop in Grenada, Rawlings and Gaddafi, we were going to see the revival of Pan-Africanism. And later on, the movement went back again into a kind of a hibernation. So today, we see the resurgence or the reemergence of Pan-Africanism. In my study of Pan-Africanism, this is what I tell people. It is like a law. The movement experiences moments of peaks, and the movement experiences moments of valleys. Now we are again in a peak moment of Pan-Africanism, and that expression of Pan-African in the 21st century, I'm going to focus on because this is what Guy asked me to speak about. Now, for people to understand, they have to know that when you talk about Pan-Africanism, the general ideas, it is anti-racism, anti-imperialism, anti-colonialism, and then anti-neocolonialism. That is Pan-Africanism. Some of the slogans: Africa for the Africans, African personality, and then back to Africa. All those elements are part of the Pan-African parlance. Now, as I want to go now to this conversation about what Guy asked me to speak about, I want to say that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 expressions of Pan-Africanism and then people are expressing their opposition to what they consider the expressions of neocolonialism in the 21st century. For instance, the presence of military bases in Africa. For instance, the economic exploitation of the continent. For instance, the fact that the cultural artifacts of Africa, since colonialism, are deposited like in the European Museum, also in the United States. So all those elements are pushing different groups of Africans at the level of the state, in the streets, in the academia, or to speak up, to write, and to denounce what they call the multi dimension of colonialism that Kwame Nkrumah called collective colonialism. So the first expression of the opposition of the Africans in the 21st century is what I call Africa on world stage. Here, I want to talk about the case of Laurent Gbagbo, former president of Ivory Coast. He was in power. There was an electoral dispute. The Europeans sided with someone that they were supporting, who used an armed rebellion to come to power. And then after Gbagbo was defeated militarily, they took him to the International Criminal Court. He was there for 8 good years, and Africans and people of African descent organized, mobilized in the streets, in the snow, in the rain, and then like consistently, and eventually Gbagbo was freed. That was one of the biggest expressions of anti-Western sentiment expressed by Africans. The second one under the African world stage is the Ukrainian war. I hear many people talking about Ukraine. I hear many people talking about African leaders. Yes, I denounce them. I oppose what many of them do. They exploit, they don't meet the needs of their people. But when the West wanted to have the support of the African leaders, the very leaders that we do not like Sassou Nguesso from Congo, like Mnangagwa from Zimbabwe, and Paul Biya from Cameroon, all of them, they decided not to side with the Europeans in the war against Russia, and then because they are fed up of the neocolonial interference in the management of their countries. The third element is about South Africa and the BRICS and the G20. Recently, you saw the battle between the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, and then Cyril Ramaphosa, who is the President of South Africa. South Africa hosted for the first time a G20 summit, a moment of pride. And that's something I forgot to say, because also dignity and pride in the African values are also part of the Pan-African expression. South Africa in 2023 organized also a BRICS summit. So these are moments of internationalism, moments of Pan-African expression. And then we saw that Donald J. Trump was going to boycott the G20 meeting on the basis of false accusation against South Africa, saying that white people were being killed in South Africa, which is not true. That's another conversation we can have another time. This was also going to be an expression of dignity expressed by Ramaphosa on behalf of South Africa and the African continent. And then there's one thing I can talk about quickly here as I talk about South Africa with the issue of Gaza. Again, over there, under the leadership of Cyril Ramaphosa, Dr. Naledi Pandor, the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of South Africa, expressed, the position of South Africa against what Israel was doing or East Gaza. They wanted to take Israel to the international court, which they did, and that also was an expression of anti-Western sentiment. The second aspect of my conversation, it is what I call the African Union mandates to states, to African states. I have seen many Pan-Africanists. When we meet with them, they would say, they would denounce all the African leaders as if Pan-Africanism can only be viable or expressed by people who are in the civil society exclusively. And then I do not agree with that. When you look at the history of Pan-Africanism, you know, for instance, I told you about Ghana in 1957 that became independent. Many other states, the independent state of Africa, Tunisia, Egypt, Sudan, and many Liberia, Ethiopia, they were at the forefront of the struggle for Pan-Africanism during the golden age of Pan-Africanism. When the African Union was created, or the Organization of the African Union was created in 1963, the OAU played its role. Yes, I do not agree with many of the things they do. Most of the time, the African Union and the African states side with the neocolonial forces, but when they do things right, we should be able to say they did right in some instances, and this is what I'm going to talk about now. And then when I talk about the African Union mandates, people have to know that in November 2023 in Ghana, the African Union gave the mandate to Ghana to organize a conference on reparation. Many people of African descent were there. It was a great conference. I was there myself. That was Ghana is the leader of the campaign for reparation for the Afro descendants. Kenya, leader for the climate justice. Togo is about to organize the Non-Pan-African Congress. This is also with the endorsement of the African Union. And then the conference I'm going to attend in a few, if God gives me the opportunity, is the International Conference about the crimes of colonialism that Algeria is going to host from November the 30th to December the 1st. These are all expressions of opposition of African states against neocolonial forces on the issue of crimes of colonialism or on the issue of reparation or on the issue of restitution. The third category is the Sahel states, political and security sovereignty. Here, this is a conversation that we've been hearing for the last 3 years or so. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Quickly, Mali under the leadership of Assimi Goïta, Burkina Faso under the leadership of Ibrahim Traoré, and then Niger under the leadership of Abdulhamid Chani. Those three countries are seen by many Pan-Africanists as those who are standing up against neocolonial forces for the sovereignty of Africa on the political, economic, and cultural level. This is something that is very important to know. And then that's number 3. The number 4 now, I want to talk about the case of Senegal. While Mali, Niger, and Burkina, even though it was the leaders who were in power, the soldiers, they came to power after the decision movement in the respective countries. But in Senegal, under the leadership of Ousmane Sonko, the current Prime Minister of Senegal, who is the leader of a political party called PASTEF, they claim Pan-Africanism, they oppose the exploitation of Africa, and then through democratic means, Senegal, PASTEF came to power, and then now the current president is Bassirou Diomaye Faye, who, by the way, is seen as somebody who is about to stab Ousmane Sonko in the back. That's another conversation. But PASTEF is a political party that claims Pan-Africanism, which is in power thanks to the leadership of Ousmane Sonko. They are not doing like the Sahel states, but the stance, the balance, the expression, it is about feeling or expressing the opposition of African masses against imperialism. The last one now is going to be what I call the citizen engagement. Here, I'm talking about all the expressions basis in Africa. Those to change, those who are opposing constitutional change, for instance, the political regime in Togo from could have the ability to elect the president. Now they elect lawmakers, and the lawmakers choose. And then people took to the street, and then they found that issue in Togo happened in Senegal. This is how Pastor and we have the political violence in Tanzania recently, in Kenya, and then we see that awakening of African masses and the African youth. They want better lives, and then this is something that we need to put emphasis on. And then I already spoke about restriction and reparations. I have spoke about the opposition against military presence in Africa, and then I want to put emphasis. I want to put emphasis on the economic sovereignty of Africa, which started with Malema in South Africa, with the economic freedom fighters, and now the economic sovereignty of Africa is becoming a very important conversation. We saw, for instance, that in 2017, in the Francophone countries, there was like a huge campaign against the CFA franc zone because that currency used by 14 or 15 African countries that deposit 50% of the foreign reserves in the French public treasury. It has been like that since 1945, and people think that enough is enough, and it is a part time to oppose that. These are all the elements that are the expressions of anti-Western sentiment in the context of the resurgence of Pan-Africanism, in the context of the revival of Pan-Africanism. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your talk. And we do have some time for questions. We see one question has come up already in the Q&A box, and we encourage people, please put more questions there in the Q&A box. And I want to welcome Farida Thombiano, who was the coordinator of the Burkina Faso chapter of World Beyond War. Welcome Farida up to the mic, and Farida will be moderating this Q&A.
Thank you, Greta. Merci beaucoup. Je suis Farida Thombiano, coordonnatrice du chapitre du Burkina Faso. Merci
I am
au
Farida, and I'm the one who is managing the chapter in Burkina Faso.
Très détaillé.
Thank you, Professor Yanka, for your intervention, which is very deep and
Donc, nous avons une question
very
dans le
detailed.
chat. The question is
We have a
about,
question in the chat.
Dorothée Sokou, who she asked, can you tell me again which were the three countries he said were at the moment rising up against neocolonization? Donc, je pense que la question est adressée au professeur Gnaka.
Okay. Right now, I was talking about the Sahel states, the countries of the Sahel state. We have Mali, under the leadership of Assimi Goïta. We have Niger, NIGER, that is led by Chiani. And then we have Burkina Faso, the country of Thomas Sankara. The country now is led by Captain Ibrahim Traoré. These are the three countries, according to the Pan-Africanists, and based on what I hear, based on our interpretation of Pan-Africanism, these three countries that put together the alliance of the Sahel states are seen as the three countries at the forefront of the Pan-African resistance. There are the countries that are the embodiments of the expression of anti-Western sentiment in the age of Pan-Africanism.
Ok, merci beaucoup. Il y a aussi d'autres questions dans le box questions-réponses. Mark ask, how bad and how good are the American military bases in Africa?
Yeah, okay. It is a great question, and I'm going to be brief on that. It's because I did not want to to take too much time, and because I like to respect other speakers' time. This is what I always do. But one thing that we need to know quickly is for us to understand the destructive role of foreign military bases in Africa. And I'm going to be quick on that. In my study of Pan-Africanism, and then last time, I think when I shared the PowerPoint that I sent out to Greta and her people, there is something that I put together that I call the wheel of imperialism, WHEEL of imperialism. That structure which we see today, it is about the global governance led by the Europeans who have created structures of institutions and agencies in different spheres of governance or management. In the field of the media, for instance, we can see how they control the media. In the field of civil society, all those NGOs that are created to advance the imperial agenda. In the field of trade, we have the World Trade Organization, how it serves and protects the interests of the most powerful. And the field of international justice, the newly created agency is the International Criminal Court that I was talking about. And then we can go and I can go give you many other elements. But as the question is about AFRICOM, I want to talk about what I call the Afro-European armies, which was put into place during colonialism, and then that the Europeans were using in order to advance the colonial agenda and to wage wars against those who wanted to resist the colonial penetration of the continent of Africa. So it was like that. And then when Africa was about to become independent, the Europeans did not want to remove the military bases from the continent of Africa. And the conference I was talking about, the All African People's Conference, particularly the one in Tunisia in 1960 and the one in Egypt in 1961, those two, they put emphasis, they denounced, you would be surprised, everything that we're doing, they were denouncing the presence of the European military presence on the continent of Africa when African countries were becoming independent. Of course, if the Afro-European armies were there to advance the colonial agenda during colonialism, if the military presence of the Europeans are enforced when Africa was about to become independent in order to promote neo-colonial agenda, today it is the same thing. They can do intelligence, they can spy on people, they can trigger coup d'etat. This is what they do. So this, for me, no one is going to tell me that the military bases of the French or the United States in Africa are there to defend the interests of the Africans. It is not true. So this is what I will say in order to answer your question.
Thank you, Professor Gnaka. There is two questions again. Carla asks, how does discussion about capitalism come in modern Pan-Africanism?
Okay. You want to give me the two questions so I can answer to both of them? Farida?
Yes.
Yeah, can you give me the second one?
Okay, the second one is it's an anonymous participant. Does Pan-Africanism also contain regional integration of Africa?
Okay. So I'm going to start with the last question. Yes. When the Organization of the African Unity was created in 1963, it is very important to say, like I said, I did not want to take too much time. I'm glad that people are asking questions on issues that I wanted to address. But for the sake of time, I skipped that. But when the Organization of the African Unity was 1963, one, the first one was the struggle for total, of course, the fight against apartheid also, and then the second element was about the creation of, regional politics. Some that were already created. For instance, the Council of Apartheid was created by the first. So Ghana was already independent in 1960, 70 African countries began. 3 years later, like some other. Now, when the OAU was one of its mandate was to see the formation of regional economic communities in Africa. So when we see all the groupings that were created in the field of international development, in the field of continental development of Africa, it is also in line with the economic dimension of Pan-Africanism. So, yes, to the question about Pan-Africanism and regional integration. Now, capitalism in modern society today, uh, uh, maybe I skip that. So, one of the things people need to know when we talk about Pan-Africanism is that those who fought against racism, against colonialism, also were fighting against capitalism. And that's why some of the leaders in the Pan-African movement where they embraced socialism. W.B. Du Bois, for instance, was a socialist. Kwame Nkrumah was a socialist. Julius Nyerere was a socialist. Senghor from Senegal was a socialist, as they wanted to oppose capitalism. They have, of course, different variations of the expression of socialism. Julius Nyerere, for instance, was talking about African socialism that he named Ujama, which is about familyhood. And then Senghor was talking about African socialism also, even though he was known as somebody who promoted the cultural intellectual movement called Negritude. Kwame Nkrumah wanted to build the United States of Africa based on the ideology of socialism. So that is the reality. Now, in the 21st century today, capitalism has become the most important economic framework since the collapse of the Soviet Union. And then, even though capitalism, now known as the neoliberalism, experienced two setbacks in 2008 and 2020. 20 was about the COVID crisis. But all the countries of the world, or most of the countries of the world, not all, most of the countries of the world, they are urged to apply neoliberal framework. For instance, less state. Then people are urged to privatize. People are urged to do outsourcing. And these are the masks that I'm wearing during the COVID. They were made in China because people wanted to make more profit. So this is capitalism in the 21st century. That's why people like me, we think that we need to promote a new ideological framework that is not socialism, that is not capitalism, because guess what? According to Julius Nyerere, socialism and capitalism, both of them are sources of conflict. In capitalism, it is the exploitation of classes by one class, which is like the bourgeois class, that is going to exploit, the proletariat. And then in socialism, it is the dictatorship of the proletariat over the bourgeois class. So Julius Nyerere rejected both ideologies when he was promoting the African socialist worldview. I take that rationale, but I'm promoting the Ubuntu philosophy in the 21st century as the ideology around which to build a humane society based on social justice. As you know, Ubuntu means humaneness. It is about solidarity. It is about sharing. It is about caring. It is about curing the society. It is about curing the ills of the society. So this is what I will say to answer your question. Yes, capitalism is there, neoliberalism is there, but we need to come with a new framework, and we are promoting the vision of the Ubuntu framework for the 21st century. One, for Pan-Africanism. Number two, for the integrated development of Africa. And number three, for the deconstruction. Let's face it. They want to deconstruct, they want to go against the West, but at the same time, they're operating a paradigm. As you know, we know how the countries, while in each BRICS founding member, philosophies like Ubuntu for South Africa. In Brazil, in Russia, it is me, which means nation, and in China, it is Confucianism, and in India, it is Satyagraha, and then with now Egypt, And then Muslim countries, we have the concept of Ummah, which means community. So this is what we are pushing for, and we hope to see many alternative worldviews that can somehow not replace but push back the neoliberal agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Gnaka. There is a last question from Pablo. He said, possibility or not fully contextual, but is there recent significant mitigation of imperial mineral extraction in the Reveland region?
I'm not sure I understand. Tu peux dire ça en français, si tu peux traduire?
Ok, je dis que c'est une question qui vient de Pablo. Je pense que la question est, il dit que ce n'est pas totalement dans le contexte. Excusez-moi. Donc, il dit que ce n'est pas totalement dans le contexte, mais il veut savoir s'il y a des une relation, je pense, hein, entre l'extraction minérale dans ces régions et aussi la situation. Je pense que c'est ce qu'il veut dire.
Okay, I'm not sure if I understand, but Pablo can still jump in and then rectify if I'm not if I'm not giving the right answer. I think based on the conversation that I just gave, okay. So based on what I just said, we have to know that when we talk about Pan-Africanism, it is because we read a little bit. That's why we're having this conversation. If not, Pan-Africanism, it is a common sense vision of people who are exploited that need to come together. People come and exploit you, then you think that by coming together, you can survive. This is what Africans and people of African descent did during slavery. This is what they did during colonialism. This is what they did during segregation. This is what they did during apartheid. They did during colonialism. This is what they're doing today in the age of neocolonialism. So, as people need to control their own resources, because when you talk about Pan-Africanism, you are talking about sovereignty. Sovereignty, it is not just about political sovereignty, it is about the economic sovereignty, it is about the cultural sovereignty. So, and then today, this is what we are seeing. If you go, for instance, to Senegal, you go to Togo, you go to Ivory Coast, I'm taking the cases of those three countries. People import rice, and it is not always from the West. They import rice. And then the most famous food in Senegal is rice, but they import rice. So the rationale of economic sovereignty will be that the Senegalese need to grow rice to feed themselves and to feed their neighbors. Same thing with same thing with the minerals, big gold, diamond, titanium, anything that you can imagine. Most of them are controlled by the European companies. And then we are speaking, and we want many people to organize, and we want leaders who can care about the economic sovereignty of their countries in order for African masses to enjoy, the divine right, to be called humans. Farida?
Ok, thank you. Merci beaucoup au professeur Gnaka pour son intervention. Merci. Maintenant, nous allons passer au second panel. The second panel about African resistance.
Conclude on that. Okay. Thank you very much, and then anytime. Can you hear me?
Je ne vous entends pas bien.
Thanks for your time.
Okay, you're welcome.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Professor Gnaka. So, Farida, you're welcome to introduce our next panel.
Okay. The next panel on the theme African resistance Pan-Africanism and struggles for sovereignty. We begin with experience and model of international solidarity for equitable collaboration with the West by Kathleen Dorothy. Is Kathleen there?
I am here.
Okay.
All right. I am waiting for the slides. All right. Well, good evening from Kenya. So, as Farida said, I am here to talk about international solidarity for equitable collaboration with the West. I'll go to the next slide. So, in other words, one hand is never enough to lift a heavy load, even though we think that we're going to be able to do that. When I took a look at the title of this particular presentation, I thought we should go back and take a look at what a partnership really is and take a look at two studies that actually polled Global North and Global South organizations about equitable partnerships and the quality of their work together. Next slide, please. So a partnership, mutually beneficial, non-hierarchical, it's synergistic. It's not transactional. So folks come together, partners come together to create something that they couldn't actually create themselves. That is what a true partnership is. And those are difficult to create, whether you're in the same country or across continents. Next slide, please. So the first study I wanted to take a look at was from the International Institute for Environment Development. So they conducted a dialogue series, and they looked at grassroots organizations, civil society organizations, INGOs, governments, and funders, and they wanted to know what their experience was on equitable partnerships between North and South global organizations. And then they put those findings in a report. Next slide, please. So I want you to take a look. I actually condensed some of the challenges from this study. There were many challenges that were cited, and most of these, I think, reflect the experience from Global South organizations. Key messaging in all of this relates to power imbalances. So at the very top, a challenge for those organizations working together is a lack of awareness of power imbalances. The ignoring of cultural differences between the partners, an unequal distribution of human and financial resources. It is not surprising to note that the global North generally has more human resources, more financial resources, and that impacts how they think about the partnership. So it leads to an equitable mindsets and prejudice around the other partner being the Global South partner. And it also leads to top-down decision making, because if you think you're better than another organization, you have more experience, more resources, you think you have more knowledge, then you're going to feel that your, in fact, decision should be front and center in the relationship. No surprise that institutional colonial histories affect all the power dynamics in the relationship. And in following suit with that, the use of language and concepts that perpetuate power imbalances. That can be seen in racist and sexist language and technical jargon. So those permeate some of the grants and the proposals and project design that take place between the Global North and the Global South organizations. So let's look at some key recommendations on the next slide, please. So first and foremost, the recommendations that came out from this group dialogue was about explicitly addressing power imbalances. So right from the start, when you're taking a look at a partnership, sit down, talk about how you're going to make decisions, because it should be through a shared decision-making process. Take a look at how you're going to set up your systems for project design, project implementation, and also finances, right? How are those finances going to be determined, the budget, and managed? Co-designing programs with local organization showed up not only in this survey, but the next one that we're going to talk about. It was very important that both the North and the South sit down together to not only look at what's going to work for beneficiaries, but what's going to work in the local context of both sets of organizations, right? Both the North and the South. So taking into account perhaps a lack of resources, a lack of staff, right? A lack of maybe financial resources as well. How is this all going to work with some of those constraints, as well as with the assets? So I think the other thing that I want to point out in here is that, and I don't want to stereotype, but my experience with Global North organizations is that they have their eye on the prize. They don't take time to create community with their partners. And creating community to create equitable partnerships is absolutely key. If you don't create community and take that time to nurture the relationships, you're not going to be able to build trust. You're not going to be able to build accountability, and you're definitely not going to be able to explicitly address things that might come up that are uncomfortable in this particular relationship. I think lastly on here, funding is always a key issue. A lot of times, Global North organizations will in fact control the budget, control the disbursement of funding, and Global South organizations want access to that funding, and they want access to decisions made about how that funding is allocated. All right, next slide. The next study I wanted to go over was done by the Rights Collab. And so I'm not going to read off that long name, but it's Ringo for short. So it's an initiative that they, through which they did a survey with primarily Global South organizations. And they wanted to get information about their relationships with their counterparts in the Global North. They wanted to see what challenges they were up against. And so interestingly enough, out of the 609 surveys, over 500 came from the sub-Saharan Africa, from Kenya. So they got quite a bit of feedback from Africa itself. We can go to the next slide, please. So they put this all together in a report, Fostering Equitable North-South Civil Society Partnerships, because their mission with all of this was to educate North and South partners on what issues were identified here and what they could do about it. Next slide, please. So the first insight was related to partnerships. So bottom-up oriented mindset. They wanted bottom-up decision-making, conversations that rose from the group that was making the decisions. They did not want top-down decision-making. So no secret here, Global South partners wanted to be listened to and have their viewpoints taken into consideration. Next slide, please. So collaboration. So it's interesting, there was a lot of good feedback about the Global South organizations working with their counterparts. Nevertheless, despite the INGO's attempts, there were key problems that came up in this collaboration. So especially around budgeting, a lot of times the Global North, their partners, gave them a budget that was already predetermined. So it did not include the Global South organization's priorities. And they felt that they had to follow that because it was already a preset agenda. Other things that they noted here in collaboration was that contract language often was used that indicated that they were the weaker partner. And they reported being treated as subcontractors when they wanted an equal partnership, right? The bottom-up approach. There was also concerns that they weren't thoroughly involved in the project design. So let's talk about that, project implementation. So I mentioned this earlier in the other study, but INGOs must understand and incorporate all aspects of the context of the organization. So not just, how are we going to benefit, right, the beneficiaries, but we want to take a look at each other's cultural differences. How does time play into what we're doing? Different models, especially aspect of program design. How does reporting look? How does monitoring and evaluation look? So looking at all of that, taking that into account creates a more respectful but a more equitable working relationship. Okay, the next slide. So there were some recommendations, and that was that the Global South organizations wanted to co-construct, right, equitable relationships with their partners in the North. And I think the theme that you're seeing throughout all of this, and why I wanted to bring some of this to this conversation, is that ongoing power imbalances, systemic inequities exist between the global North and global South organizations. And that is a key note in all of the surveys and the results that folks got back. So the global South, they're advocating for changes in structures and practices, right? Improving the relationship and partnership approaches. People should take more time to create community and work from that. And of course, seeking equality and interdependence for decision making. So those were ways that they felt like their partners in the North could co-create with them and help them create a different kind of partnership, a more equal partnership. All right, let's move on to the other slide. So I wanted to talk a little bit about triangular cooperation. I have to say it was kind of tricky for me to come up with equitable models with the West, because we could argue what equitable means in a variety of different situations. Triangular cooperation, so that involves a global South country helping another one, and facilitated by maybe a traditional Western partner, but with non-traditional aid. So in that sense, a global South partner is helping another one in terms of sharing expertise, but the traditional Western partner may in fact provide funding, they may provide expertise, they may provide technical assistance. So there's a variety of ways that they might contribute to this. However, in theory, this approach is supposed to, again, honor co-creation and honor local solutions to the problems that these countries are facing. So let me go into some of what I consider somewhat equitable relationships in terms of the work between folks in the West or the global North and South. So the World Food Program facilitates direct knowledge, expertise, technical know-how to a variety of global South countries. So they themselves can provide all of this expertise, or they can in fact partner with a donor that comes in to, again, provide that kind of support to the countries that are working on a better way to address food instability and agricultural growth. So I focus on this as being they're a program that's based in Rome, but a lot of their work takes place in the global South. Next slide, please. Another one I wanted to take a look at and share is the Global Partnership for Education. So they have a pretty simple mission. They want to give kids a quality education, and they work a lot with children in crisis-affected areas. So their entree is to work with the government on helping them create and support stronger systems, right, that work for the education process in their particular country. But they don't just partner with the government. The government is one stakeholder, as well as the teacher associations, the civil society organizations, donors, the private sector. So they bring all of these partners together to work on an analysis. So they have a model for doing an analysis of what the education system looks like in that particular country. And together, they analyze what's going on, the assets, what could be better, and then they create an implementation plan. They co-create one, which in fact, then they're all responsible for managing that once they've made the decision on what that implementation plan looks like. So the GPE works in Latin America, Asia, and most African countries. Next slide, please. This is a mouthful to say, the Global Health European and Developing Countries Clinical Trials Partnership 3. Here's something that, referring earlier to taking a look at power imbalances and setting things up from the start so that the partnerships are equitable. So this is a partnership with European and African countries, and their mission is to fund programming in sub-Saharan Africa that addresses a variety of diseases. So they fund clinical trials, research, innovative treatment, and they're an NGO that was actually founded in the Netherlands. So the EDCTP Association, part of this, is comprised of European countries and African countries, and that entity co-governs this entire entity along with the European Union. So it's set up from the very start to have equal amounts of board members. They hold equal voting and decision-making processes. And of course, they share the strategic planning and decision-making of this particular organization. So I think they tackled it right from the start on how they wanted to operate in terms of having an equitable partnership. All right, last but not least, I have one more example. Give Directly. Give Directly sort of turned the traditional donor model upside down and decided that they were going to give cash directly to folks living in poverty, right? So they have done this since 2009, and they work primarily in Africa, although they do have some projects that are in the United States, and one is in Chicago. So they come in, they determine where they want to work. They align with the government, because part of coming in is not coming in and blindsiding folks, but to work with the government on what their development plans are so they can align with that. They also align with the community. They want to know who are the neediest recipients. How does the community define that? And since they do their cash processes are through mobile money accounts, they will work with businesses to help set up the technology, purchase the equipment, so the recipients, in fact, can have what they need to be able to participate in the program. Of course, they have lots of funding partners, right? Corporations, foundations, and governments who give money so that they can give it out directly to the recipients in the communities that they're working with. Next slide, please. So I think it's clear that we all have more work to do to create true models of equitable collaboration with the West. So let's take note of what's working here and recommendations that were made to move forward, because this is all a work in progress. And I'll just leave with the Martin Luther King quote, which is that we may have all come on different ships, but we're on the same boat now. And I would add that being in that same boat, we need to travel together to make the magic happen in terms of how we get our needs met. Next slide, please. The next slide just has my contact information on it, which I'm sure these slides will go out to you, and that will be included in it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I'm going to bring up Farida again to the microphone. Farida.
Thank you, Kathleen, for your presentation. I'm looking into the chat. There is no question.
We can make some time for the questions after our next presenter on this panel.
Okay.
Sounds good.
So we move into the second theme.
Yes, can you introduce our next speaker, Farida?
Okay. The next speaker is Christian Nyendahimana. He's going to speak about elimination of United States Foreign Development Assistance Program. What are the alternative African solutions? Is Christian ready? Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much, Fariba, and yeah, thank you so much, everyone at World Beyond War. I think that putting together this event is much needed, especially at this time, and it is a pleasure for me to contribute, of course, into this. I have to acknowledge that it is hard to speak after Kathy and Jerve. But yeah, let me introduce myself. My name is Christian Ngendahimana. I'm originally from Burundi in East Africa, and calling or joining from the United States at this time. Good afternoon and good morning. Now, it was asked from me to discuss about the U.S. foreign assistance cuts and what are the implications, and most importantly, what should be the African solutions. Can you go to the next slide, please? So I'm going to discuss aid as a shared goal responsibility. And here, it is important to know that through the Sustainable Development Goals, especially the Goal 17, all the Sustainable Development Goals cannot happen without give me 1 second. Yeah, I'm back. So as I was saying, the Sustainable Development Goal 17 is about partnership, and all the other goals are not possible without the Goal 17. Next slide, please. And next slide, please.
Do you want this slide that says legal and policy frameworks?
Yeah, thank you. So for this goal, like I was saying, from the international community agreement perspective, the aid is sustained or supported by the goal that calls for partnership, and all the international community must pull together the support to realize the sustainable development goals. Next slide. Though we have this call for international partnership, there are some challenges. And when I was thinking about this topic, one of a few challenges that came into my mind includes the aspect that yes, we need to call for aid, but at the same time, aid is frequently criticized for serving donors' interests rather than serving the needs at the local community perspective. On the other hand, donor countries often leverage aid as a tool of economic influence. And from the presentation from Gervais, I think that he shared a few aspects of this, and which raise legitimate questions about the balance between genuine support and self-interest, which highlights the need for transparency, accountable, and equitable aid mechanism. Next slide, please. With the previous slides, that questions what is the impact and why the international community should bring in support. When I was searching about what people do think about international aid or foreign aid, especially in America, I came up with this poll that was conducted in 2023, and that came up with a few realities. And as you can see those realities, 6 in 10 US adults say that US government was spending too much overall on foreign aid. 7 in 10 US adults say that US government was putting too much money toward assistance to other countries. Now, when we analyze views from Republicans versus Democrats, we realize that 9 in 10 Republicans and 55% of Democrats agree that the country was overspending on foreign aid. And 6 in 10 US adults say that government spending was too little on domestic issues. Next slide, please. Now, what is the US aid cuts to Africa, and what is the impact? The 2025 US administration paused most USAID global humanitarian programs. That is out of question. We are seeing the impact on the field, on the ground. Only a small number of emergency life-saving programs receive some kind of waivers. And we all know that Africa is the hardest hit region due to heavy reliance on the US development aid. And we can dig in and look into the article that was published in 2018 by Africa Hope Channel. Next slide. Now, what is the impact? The US, being the largest provider of humanitarian assistance globally, Sub-Saharan Africa being the most hit, could suffer more than any other region during the aid pause. US gave to the region more than 6.5 billion in humanitarian assistance just for last year. And for more than 2 decades, through the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, more than 25 million of people were saved, and the majority of this population being from Africa. More than 20 million people globally receive HIV treatment through the program, and these numbers are provided by the United Nations agency that is supporting people who are impacted by the HIV. And right during the pause, we were seeing a lot of calls from different regions in Africa, and people who are going to receive assistance and who are finding that the doors were locked. This doesn't mention many thousands of workers who were furloughed or who were laid off. And if in Africa, in the context of Africa, if one person is working, this person is supporting on average 8 persons. Next slide, please. The sudden stop to food aid, HIV/AIDS treatment, malaria and TB programs, water sanitation program were unfortunately stopped due to this aid freeze. Warehouses that were full of undelivered food supplies were spoiled, and health clinics, vaccine campaign, and nutrition programs were shutting down, and we can see the risk of rising deaths, disease outbreaks, and food insecurity and displacement. And all of this in the context of wars, in the conflict of health issues, health concerns, disease outbreak, as we will see this in the next slide. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, immediate humanitarian crisis for vulnerable population was in limbo, and weak we know that weak government cannot replace aid overnight. Possible instability, unrest, migration, violence, rise of extremist groups, because as we say in Africa, if you go hungry, you are easy manipulated. And all of this through global health risk with diseases like HIV, malaria, TB, mpox that could spread without containment. Next slide. Now, in summary, water and public health were in crisis. We can easily see a lack of protection for vulnerable groups, women, children, infants, people living with disabilities. are negatively impacted. We observe food insecurity and malnutrition, and unfortunately, education is disrupted, and this was seen across all the refugee camps where children were forced to abandon their schools. Next slide. Now, when looking at this fragile aid dependency, we can see where the population were depending on aid and where the funding cuts could hit. If you can, I'm glad Kathy, who is in Nairobi, can provide more insight on this. But the Horn of Africa will see a huge impact of this, while the majority of countries in sub-Saharan region will see an impact of the freeze and the cut of foreign aid. Next slide. Now, what are the interpretations? How do Africans interpret this? We saw the perceptions of the foreign aid in America. Now let's compare this to how this is seen in Africa. Western aid used as a political leverage and soft power to influence government. This has been discussed, and especially from political actors. Aid dependency weakens African sovereignty and discourages self-reliance. This is well discussed through political sectors or among political actors when they want to advance sovereignty as the alibi or as a justification of why African countries should not rely on foreign aid. The withdrawal may force some African leaders to rethink resource management and economic independence. We should be looking at this carefully and monitor what is the shift among the political actors. And some leaders privately welcome the end of conditional aid, especially when it requires respect of human rights, when it supports, when the aid is requesting recipients to use it in the well-being of their societies. Next slide, please. Key facts when I was searching about this, I came to understand that aid freeze is real and severely disrupting operations. Long-term reliance on foreign aid could create dependency and weakens domestic policy control. But on the other hand, Africa has abundant natural resources, including minerals, land, rail, that could finance development. Now, the question is, how do we put the assets that we have into the benefit to the African societies? Go to the next slide, please. Now, let's look at some of the unproven claims. And I would need some of the input from the audience. There are some assertions about foreign programs deliberately harming Africans, but these lack of evidence. They do not have evidence, but these are some of the claims. I remember in the 80s, some Africans were questioning HIV and were blaming Western partners for this. Not all African leaders support aid cuts. That's also something on which the audience could bring in some feedback, but reactions differ by country and interest, of course, and resource wealth does not automatically produce development without strong governance. We can see this from different countries that have a lot of natural resources, and those natural resources, instead of being a blessing to the countries, unfortunately, it has been a source of instability. You can see what is happening in Eastern Democratic Congo. We can see what is happening in Sudan. We can look at what is happening in the Sahel region. So these are some of the claims that are there and that are subject to debate. Next slide, please. Let's look at what Africa as a continent and African countries, everyone here could be looking into. The aid freeze can be seen as an opportunity to Africa, and if we can see this and invite us to look into exploring chances to develop financing through fair resources management. I was mentioning this previously while analyzing the richness that we have, the natural resources that we have, but that are suffering from a lack of fair resource management. If we can look into opportunity to strengthen institutions, local industries, regional cooperation, I will talk about regional integration when I'll be discussing some of the recommendations, but also see or look into potential renegotiation of unfair economic deals and contracts. In some countries, especially around minor resources, I've seen some momentum through which political actors are renegotiating the unfair economic deals. And I think that this should be seen as an opportunity. But also, I think that Africa should promote the South cooperation. Next slide, please. These solutions have been analyzed through our recent research, The Africa We Want. I invite each of you to take a look at the article, Financing the Africa We Want. This article recommends African actors to maximize on domestic resources, to mobilize and monetize natural assets, attract investment, reduce dependence on foreign aid. Can you go to the next slide? And invest in local talent and capacity. Here, there is a huge knowledge at the local level that needs to be put into account. Promoting regional economic integration. This is, I believe, much needed. There is a need to adopt the digital innovation with what we are seeing across the world. That I don't want Africa to be left behind, and we really need to adjust to the trends, to the current trends. Yes, let us mobilize domestic revenue and make sure that domestic revenue is used for the purpose of the well-being of those in need. Diversify funding sources. This is very important. We do not just need to limit ourselves to West and South, North-South partnership. There are also possibility to look into South-South cooperation. It is important to enhance efficiency and reduce the waste. I think that there is, we really need to challenge ourselves. People are here, we are leaders. We are contributing into this through different perspectives. So we really need to call and enhance efficiency and reduce waste, and advocate for sustainable funding policies, not just looking into short-term funding, but look into a broader perspective. Next slide. And it is this is a call, and at the same time, it is a challenge. Africa should not negotiate from desperation. I think that Africa is a strong continent. Africa has a lot of potential, a huge potential. We just need to be aware of the strength that we have and negotiate from that strength. There is a need to transition from dependency and build ownership and resilience. As we look into the impact of the aid freeze and the opportunities that this can create, on the other hand, it is important to do everything we can to make sure that we take control of our destiny. And one of the area that we should be looking into is the goal that was calling African nations to end AIDS by 2030. I don't know how this could be made possible, but you and I, through a South-South cooperation, through a rethinking of our strategies, we can make this happen. And it is not a matter of choices. It is a must. And with this, I am open to your contributions, to your questions, and most importantly, I am looking to engaging with each of you as we strive to build peaceful communities and prosperous communities through Africa, and creating opportunities for everyone to thrive and live in dignity. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, dear Christian, for this presentation. So we are moving to the question and answer box to see the questions. I think that the first question is for Kathleen. And so Paulette Lachance, Ubuntu Africa, Confucius China, and India. Please provide an information of I don't understand the question. Is Kathleen there?
I think that
Yes,
was a question for Professor Gnaka. I'm not sure if he's still with us. We also will be sending the recording afterwards, so that might be able to answer that question, and we can provide some follow-up resources.
Okay. So the second question is for Kathleen again. She said, thank you for your inspiring presentation. I wonder if this kind of unequal relationships between NGO and Global South NGO also exist in the cooperation program of women, UNICEF.
I'm not sure does it exist? I'm not sure I understand the question.
I'll just help repeat it here. It's also in the Q&A box if you want to follow along as we're reading it. I wonder if this kind of unequal relationships between INGOs and Global South NGOs also exists in the cooperation programs of UN Women and UNICEF.
That's an interesting question. I have followed UN Women for a while, and have been surprised, I think, by the comments that they've received about feeling that they haven't really created and sustained equitable relationships related to the projects, right? Related to the programs and related to the partnerships. There's a sense there that, again, that they know more, and their expertise is greater than those around them. And so there's a sense that they really drive the agenda as opposed to listening to some of the other partners that they work with. Now, I don't have personal experience with that, but those are some of the, I guess, the critiques I've seen of that organization. I don't know much about UNICEF. I don't know. I haven't read that kind of information with UNICEF. Not to say that it isn't there. I just haven't seen it.
Okay, thank you, Kathleen. I think there is no more question in the chat.
Yeah, I see there were a few questions about sort of the technical aspect of will we share the slides? Will we share the recording? And we can say, yes, absolutely. We will be sharing all the slides and the recording afterwards. I see a few questions are now coming in the Q&A box, so I'll pass it back to you, Farida.
So we move on with Kathy Kelly, board president, acknowledgement and a reflection on World Beyond War's perspective and on imperialism.
Well, thank you so much, Farida. I think we do have some lingering questions in the Q&A. So just before I would start, I wonder, Kathy and Christian, would you want to take a look at that Q&A box? There's a question about visions you have for alternatives beyond nation states, and also an open question on how World Beyond War's approach would be of relevance for peace, Pan-Africanism, African ownership and independence instead of neo-colonialism, exploitation, warmongering. And it seems that there's a real desire to know more about the Ubuntu philosophy. So maybe that can be something for a future webinar or online seminar. But do you have any final comments, Kathy and Christian?
Well, I think the United States right now is very far from the Ubuntu philosophy. I had a conversation in Kenya with a taxi driver who felt so fortunate that he was in Kenya and of the Kenyan culture, because he said they take care of each other. Obviously, in America, that doesn't seem to be happening. And I wanted to share a quote to Christian's excellent presentation. So, the United States, Mark Rubio was the Secretary of State, and one question he posed to the State Department and the workers, that some of those eventually got laid off, is he said, every dollar we spend, every program we fund, and every policy we pursue must be justified with the answer to three simple questions. Does it make America safer? Does it make America stronger? Does it make America more prosperous? Definitely not Ubuntu, right? Definitely not that. So, and of course, if folks couldn't answer those questions related to their own, like PEPFAR and those things, obviously they were gone. And a lot of those programs and funding for them are gone.
Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, to both Cathys, it's a great coincidence. Yes, to the question of the visions. I have a great vision of Africa that rely on its potentiality, but that is open to win-win partnership. And if I can borrow the great learned lessons from Kathy's presentation, I think that there is a need to transfer knowledge and build on local expertise, as we would remain open to collaboration. And I really like how we should build a momentum that allows both partnership and the collaboration in a win-win perspective. And that's the vision that I have for Africa. And I think that it is possible. We have great people from West who are open and who are willing to support and help to build capacities for a strong partnership that that creates the win-win perspective. For the Ubuntu philosophy, I love it, and I strongly support the move. Africa is the future of the humanity, if I can simply say it like this. And if we can help the world to reinvent the model that allow human beings to live in relation, knowing that there is nothing you can do without me, because the Ubuntu philosophy is you are because I am, and I cannot be without you. That's the great philosophy that I'm supporting and that everyone should be supporting. I don't think that America first, American interest first, I don't think that they are jeopardized through a win-win process, through the Ubuntu you are because I am. I think that it's just a matter of temporary, and I think that, and I'm really thankful to both Kathy. Kathy is here, and we can do this together. It's about bringing together all our energies, bring together all our expertises, and put together our contributions to the better world that we want to see. And with that, I'm so thankful for being associated with this, and I'm open to push this conversation through World Without War, or World Beyond War. And again, thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I have the great privilege, really, to be the person who, on behalf of World Beyond War, thanks every speaker for your clarity and for your courage. And we know that, Guy, as you organized this conference, you yourself were dealing very concretely with consequences of the very imperialism that you so wisely must challenge. I liked it that here and there people said, don't forget to have tea. And I've gone to Afghanistan many times, and you drink a lot of tea. But at one point, these very, I want to say, plucky youngsters, teenagers, managed to get Professor Noam Chomsky on a Skype call with them to have tea and ask questions. And the youngest, Gulamai, said, Prof. Noam, what do you think about reparations? And Noam Chomsky said, oh, that's a very important question. Any civilized country would pay reparations, in this case to Afghanistan, for the suffering caused. Now, I would like to ask everyone to join me in remembering the January 6th, some call it insurrection, and how uncivilized it looked when those people barged into the United States halls. And President at the time, Joe Biden, said, this is not who we are. And I thought, oh, yes, it is. Because when you look at the way the United States barged along with Western powers into the continent of Africa and enslaved, marauded, rampaged, destroyed, separated families, caused enormous generational suffering, engaged in constant theft and extraction, and still it goes on. As Sala Kangoro showed us yesterday, it's been a costume change. And so, my friends, I grew up in the 50s in the United States, and we began to see, okay, those guys with the pointy white hoods riding on horses and terrorizing Black families in their neighborhoods, those same people sometimes put on the suits and we're part of the John Birch Society. It's kind of hard to know, isn't it? But yes, it's actually been through, and we have to admit it, even some of the well-intentioned aid agencies, the neo-colonial imperialism persists. And so we must be honest. But one of the things this conference also has helped us see is that when we talk about, and forgive me, I don't like jargon very much, but decolonizing the mindset. Okay. Anytime I see the suffix IZE, I kind of get an allergic reaction. But to take ourselves out from the mindset that ever said it was proper to carve the continent of Africa into division after division after division, dividing people's language groups, their families, their economic relationships. Why should we go forward with a state-centric attitude? And so I was so grateful that this stirring, evocative conference began with the very dynamic presentation from Mali. We listened to the people from Indivisible Tatumata Diawara. And I hope everybody can listen again and again, because the artistry and the energy of each one of those assertions can guide us. And so I would just like to welcome all of us together. So I was a high school study teacher, I'll confess. And I remember I used to say, ladies, I need your undivided attention. Oh my goodness. But that's how I want to end this conference. May we go forward together with undivided attention for what everyone in this very valuable conference has raised, and recognize that among the inequities are inequities in safety. And then bases will never, ever create that security. And as they should be planning for reparation, an itinerary ought to be made for all of the ways in which the United States and other countries have been responsible and ought to pay reparations and work together for that reclamation that has been demanded, asserted. And as you say, it must happen. Africa is the future. And so let's hope that we can take those boats out into the storms, row hard, catch courage from one another, and never forget to say, we're sorry. We're so very sorry for mistakes, but we want to sit down and have tea and build those friendships. Thank you, all of you. Greta, special thanks for all of the organizing. Guy, we wish you safety, and your team. Oh my goodness, we learned so much from you. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy, for those invigorating words. And I know we're just about out of time, so I think Guy has some final words for us before we wrap up with a song.
Oui, merci. Ça sera juste un merci à tous les intervenants et aussi merci à tous les coordinateurs africains qui
Thank
m'ont
you
aidé dans
to
la
all
préparation
the speakers and our African coordinators.
Et je pense que l'événement, loin de rechercher dans notre histoire collective ce qui va nous diviser, permet plutôt de jeter des ponts entre les peuples occidentaux
And
et
things that
africains.
were meant to separate us are actually things that are going to bring us together.
Je vous remercie encore et on se
Thank you once again.
avec la suite des discussions pour tout ce qui concerne le travail de World Beyond War en Afrique. Merci.
Thank you again, and see you together as we work on World Beyond War. Thank you.
Okay, great. So yeah, I think Farida, did you want to say any final words before we go to the song?
Non, je veux juste dire merci. Merci à World Beyond War pour la considération. Merci à tous les panélistes.
I want to say thank you to World Beyond War for the consideration.
À Guy, à tout le monde, merci.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, wonderful. So we now have a song by Joan Baez, We Shall Overcome. It is not only a message of hope, it represents the certainty of a better future where everybody will have equal rights and opportunities, no matter what race or social or economic background they come from. The fact that it's so easy to relate to the song is one of its many strengths. In fact, one can address its message to different aspects of one's life, overcoming a challenge, having someone by your side that supports and respects you, not being afraid, living in peace. These are all dreams that people should aim for, and we hope that they do. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Have a good rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're located. We'll send the recordings afterwards.